Hello, History 120 students. Everybody's having a good day. Recording this here Thursday evening, October 8th. Finished up my high school work day and staying a little late here to try to do some things for my online class. And I posted an announcement last night about Module 3 and 4, the document assignments and grading, and mentioned that I was going to try to do a little video to talk a little bit about document skills and what I'm expecting of you with those document assignments. I actually had posted a video that I did a couple of semesters ago discussing document skills and activities. A few people checked that out. It was posted in an announcement, but I just thought I would update that and do a new one. So here we are. And just a heads up, I am usually when I try to do videos, I try to have a script laid out, but kind of limited on time here, so I'm just going to kind of extemporize and do this off the top of my head. So bear with me. Hopefully I can stay focused and it will be coherent. So be aware of that as I work my way through this. And it may take me a while. Try to keep these videos as short as I can, usually under 15 minutes. This one's probably going to go over that, maybe 20-25 minutes by the time I get done. But I encourage you to view the whole thing, because I think it'll be helpful on document assignments and just your understanding of the course as a whole. Oftentimes, especially that Module 3 document assignment, students struggle with that a bit. And each semester, I think I need to go back and revise that. If any of you are thinking about becoming a teacher, I think one of the things that you'll find often that is frustrating as a teacher is that recognition of all the things that you could be doing different or that you could be adding to what you're doing, and just not having the time to be able to get those things done. That's a frustration that is continual, as I'm always thinking I could do this, I'd like to add this, but the restrictions of time don't always permit that. So, like I said, if any of you are thinking about teaching as a future, that's something that you will find yourself up against quite a bit. And it's can be frustrating, but it's part of what makes the job enjoyable too, is the idea that you can continually be doing things differently. But this is an education course, so I digress. I need to talk a little bit about our assignments, and like I said, this may take me a little bit, so I need to get moving. And I'm a little bit crunched on time, as I need to get home for an online appointment in a little bit too. So before I start talking specifically about the document assignments, I really, really like the document assignments because I feel it gets you to the heart of what history is. And one thing I want to say, and I don't think I've shared this at this point in the course, and I share this with my high school students a lot. I understand that you are not on the path to becoming historians, and I understand that my job is not to turn all of you into historians, so I hope you don't feel like that. I know that, and some of you may well be interested in a future teaching history or some other capacity, and as I've mentioned before, there are many other opportunities out there despite popular conceptions or misconceptions. Again, I digress. But I realize that many of you are on other paths, and all of those are perfectly acceptable, and some of you may be figuring out that path. But I, and obviously I'm biased in this, feel that history is a very valuable skill. And you might think, skill? What's the skill? But history is very much about a skill. It's about thinking skills, analysis skills, comprehending skills, and are valuable in all aspects of life. And so I think there's a lot of value to what I do here in history. But again, obviously I'm biased in that as a history social studies teacher. And again, I could digress a little bit, but one point I often make with my high school students is the fact that a frustration of mine is that we often view education, the main point of education, is just about getting a good job. And certainly that is one of the key benefits of having a good education. But and if you study history and examine the origins of education in our country, you understand that early on, one of the biggest reasons education was emphasized was for the benefit of society and to create a better society and knowledgeable, informed citizenry. And I think that's critical, and I think that education, in the end, one of the biggest purposes is just about developing yourself as a person and the ability to have a better, fuller life. And again, I digress, and this is not an educational philosophy course, so I will move on. But that affects, I mention all that because it influences why I like these document assignments so much, and also hopefully helps you better understand why I present the course in the way I do and what my goals are. I like to use a lot of resources from an organization called the Stanford History Education Group, which is headed by a man by the name of Sam Weinberg, who wrote a book several years ago, back in the early 2000s, called Historical Thinking and Other Unnatural Acts. Weinberg is not a historian, he's a psychologist, but he began examining how historians go about doing what they do and thinking about what they're thinking, and how that should influence the way that history is taught. And that's had a profound influence on me and my teaching of history. And so one of the things, I use a lot of materials from the Stanford History Education Group, even in my college courses, because I think they're very applicable. And so one of the things, and the other little caveat here, is I am doing this as a screen share, and I have not made lots of videos with screen sharing, and so hopefully this works well. But I am going to slide over a slide here titled, What is History? And I'm going to try to reframe that a little bit so you can see that a little better. Maybe I can shrink that down just a bit. It's not going to let me do that. So I will, oh, there it goes. It's just slower thinking with this. There we go. That's good. So what is history? History is an account of the past. And I would add to that, it's an understanding of the past. And a lot of people, I think, have the perspective that history is just a bunch of dry, dusty old facts. And it is not that. And not to stir lots of controversy here, but popular radio talk show host Rush Limbaugh is known for having said, history is what happened. And that's a little problematic for me because our understanding of what happened is always evolving. And some people would say, well, he's right, it's what happened. But our understandings are always evolving because we're always gaining more information because of what historians do and gaining more information. And an example that I use with students is September 11th, the attacks. We understand much more today what happened on that day than we did when it occurred in 2001. But what is particular to note about is that 100 years from now, people will understand much more about what happened on that day than we do today because there's so much information. There's so many, for instance, government documents that are sealed up that we don't see that will provide more insights on that. We'll discover journals and phone logs and recordings that aren't out there today that will cause us to re-understand and reframe what happened. The current situation we're living in with COVID is another good example. Our understanding of this is going to be very different 100 years from now because we're going to see the fallout from it. We'll see the long-term effects from it. And the understanding 200 years from now will be different than the understanding 100 years from now. A, because there's going to be more information that will be discovered and found, and B, because time will give us a different perspective. So history is an account of the past and our understanding of the past. And as it says here, accounts can differ and understandings can differ, based on one's perspective, the angle you view that from. And we rely on evidence to construct the accounts of the past. And historians primarily rely on written evidence, although as you see in this course, we also use visual evidence and artifacts and things along those lines. And we must question the reliability of information as we look at it. And when we talk about reliable, what we're talking about is how do we know it's truthful? And there's a lot of things that influence that. And reliability is not a all or none proposition. It is a spectrum, ranging from being very reliable to not very reliable at all. And I think that's a good way to look at it. And I don't think anything could be considered 100% reliable because there's so many things that influence it. There might be some things that might be considered not reliable at all. Despite that, it doesn't mean they're not useful historically, and that's another conversation. And then the last point here, any single piece of evidence is insufficient to build a plausible account. You can't understand an event based on one piece of evidence. And one of the things I emphasize to my high school students is that how much evidence does a historian want when they are trying to build a picture of something? They want as much evidence as they can get. They always want more. That's going to give them a more complete picture. But one of the things about history is that, and you'll see this in one of the document assignments we come to regarding the Boston Massacre, we may never have a complete picture. September 11th is another good example. We may never have a complete picture of that. There will be questions. But the more evidence you get, the more complete understanding that you get of that. And I can talk a lot more about these things, but again, I'm trying to keep this short. I'm already 11 minutes in. So that is what history is about. And historians spend a lot of time evaluating and assessing evidence. And so that's what these document activities largely are about. And so the next piece that I'm going to show you is just a historical thinking chart. So I'm going to slide that over to the screen here. And again, I wish that this would let me reframe a little bit, but it doesn't. There we go. So that's a little better. And I'm trying to get myself out of the way of the chart. So I'm not going to go through this total chart. And I posted this chart in the announcement that I mentioned. I will post all of this material in the resources section of the course, so you can refer back to it as we move through the course. Should have done that from the beginning. Again, one of the many things like I could have done and just haven't had the time for whatever reason in the past. Basically, the document activities are going to require you to use at least one of 4 historical thinking skills. And those skills are sourcing, contextualization, corroboration, close reading. And you can look over the chart. Again, I'll post this. But sourcing is asking questions like about the source itself. Who wrote it? What was their perspective? Were they in a position to be informed about what was happening? When was it written in relation to the event that actually occurred? Why was it written? What was the purpose of the person who wrote it? Because you will read a Civil War officer's after-battle report to his commanding officer is going to be written in a much different manner than what he might write in a letter home to a family member. Is it reliable? Why or why not? Again, lots of things that might influence that, and we'll see examples of that in the course. Contextualization has to do with what was going on when the event occurred and how what was going on influences that event. One of my favorite history professors that I had as a student, Dr. Dominic Capecci at Missouri State, often admonished us that you cannot study history in a vacuum. You have to know what else is going on in the surrounding world and time and the events leading up to it. So how do those influence it? Corroboration. This is what did other documents and sources say? Do they agree with what this document and source says? What are other possible documents that might be out there? What are other possible existing information? Of those documents, what are most reliable? And I would say, adding to this, how do these documents mesh with the existing knowledge and research and understanding of an event. And then close reading. Looking closely at what is there, what is written, and understanding it. What is the evidence that the author uses to support themselves? What is the language that is being used? And that gives you a lot of clues about why they wrote it. So a lot of these skills overlap. How does the author's, the language, the words they use, indicate their perspective and why they wrote it? So those are important things to look at. And again, I'm not going to go through the rest of this because of time, but I would encourage you, I will post this again in the resources section of the course, and to go back and take a look at this and refer to it to the course. And for this video, I'm going to primarily focus on the skill of sourcing, because that's what the document exercise is for, Module 3 and Module 4, skill of contextualization. And so I'm going to pull this slide over, which again, I will post in the resources section. See how much I can shrink this down here. There we go. I'm going to move this some more. Contextualization. When you contextualize a document, you want to ask yourselves when looking at a document, when and where was it created? What was different then? What was the same in regards to the event that it's describing? And then how might circumstances in which the document was created affect its outcome? And in the case of the document we just looked at, the circumstances that they were having difficulty attracting settlers are obviously going to affect that document as it's trying to get people to invest. So that is contextualization, and that is the skill, especially as I said, on the other two documents that we look at. The Mayflower in the resources section of the class. Here's a poster that deals with close reading and talks about what you need to do in regards to that. The computer is being slow in responding in my efforts to get it to shrink down. So bear with me. Okay, here we go. Close reading. What claims does the author make? What evidence does the author use? What language, words, phrases does the author use to persuade the document's audience? How does the document's language indicate the author's perspective? So that is what you need to think about in regards to close reading. And all of these overlap. We've talked about sourcing documents, corroboration. Again, if you have multiple documents on a source, do those documents agree with one another? If not, why do they not agree? If it's a single document, does it mesh with what you know from other documents? What are other possible documents? What documents are most reliable? And I would also say, to add into that, how does it mesh with the given understandings? Okay, and then this one, what do other documents say? And then I'm going to slide over the sourcing video here. We talked a bit about this already. Again, let me shrink this down. When you read a document, you want to ask questions in particular about the person that wrote it, who wrote it. Move this a little more. There we go. Who wrote the document? What is their perspective? Why was it written? When was it written? Where was it written? Is it reliable? Why or why not? I may talk some more about some of these on through the course. Again, I will put these in the resources section. I would encourage you to take a look at those and think about those when we tackle the document questions. One of the things I'm considering doing is doing not really a extra credit exercise, but maybe in one of the modules including an exercise that uses the same skills as that Module 3 document assignment used, and giving people a shot at doing that and maybe making that a little more structured, and walking you through that, and letting you do that assignment and using that score in place of the score for the Module 3 document assignment. Again, I've gone long on time, so I haven't talked about the Module 4 document assignment. That is the assignment. As I slide that over, and again, I'm going to move my screen, that deals with the Salem witch crisis. That document assignment involves the skills of contextualization, what was going on, the economic issues of the time period, religious issues of the time period, how those influence things, and then close reading. Reading what the witnesses said, reading the sermon of the pastor, looking at that closely, looking for key phrases that might bring specific attention to issues. Again, I want to wrap this up. I'm at 31 minutes. I just feel like I could go into some more detail about this, so I'll try to, as we go through the course, continue to add information about this. But I hope this is helpful, and I hope you see how you can apply this in a lot of different aspects, not just with historical documents, but just any kind of information that you come across, and to think about that information critically, because those are valuable skills. The one thing I will say, the document assignments from here on out will be more structured than the ones, the first two. And what I mean by that is that they're going to be a little more step by step. I will ask you to do some things in those document assignments which you're not going to submit. Maybe fill out a graphic organizer or something. And you're kind of on the honor system on that. And I understand you're pressed on time, but what I would say is if you follow the steps and go through it step by step and don't just jump to trying to answer the final question, moving through those steps of breaking the documents down, doing the analysis will help you create a much stronger response to what it is that you will answer and turn in for the course. So as we get to those, follow those steps along, because that's intended to guide you in your analysis of the documents and lead you to a stronger, more complete response. So I encourage you that, and I encourage you to look back at these documents, these posters, these sources that I've shared with you about historical thinking skills, and think about how you would apply those to the document that you're analyzing. So hopefully that helps provide some clarity about some things. If you have questions, please let me know. And again, I may try to do some more things as we go through the course to kind of clear up some of this. But I'm going to wrap this up. We're rolling up on 35 minutes, way longer than I hoped or anticipated. And we'll move forward, and hopefully we'll continue to develop these historical thinking skills, and you guys will see the value and the benefits of those skills beyond just in the course. So I hope everybody has a good evening.